Hey everyone. In this episode, I talked to Meredith McCowan, an astrologer, and I wanted to talk about astrology and have her on the show to sort of debunk some of the myths and misconceptions of the science of astrology, and also to share how useful and beneficial and eye-opening astrology can be. We talk about what astrology is and what it isn't. She breaks down some of the core concepts of astrology, namely about our astrological signs, and we talk about how we can use astrology to become more connected to our natural intuitive selves, which in this world right now can be in really short supply. She reveals a few details about her chart and mine, and we talk about my favorite phrase of the whole show, peeling back the programming. That stuff that has become ingrained in us and puts us in autopilot and has us staying safe instead of exploring what we're really made of. So let's get to the episode. Hi, Meredith.
Hello.
So I'm really happy to have you here today because we are talking about a subject that I was a little hesitant to bring to the podcast, but realized, you know what? No, we need to talk about this. And that the subject is astrology. And you are an astrologer, among many other things. And I have worked with you many times to read my charts and help me sort of understand, how to make my choices in beneficial ways and all kinds of things. And we'll get into all the things that astrology can do. But I first would love to just hear a little bit about what you do as an astrologer and how you got into this. Like, because this is not where you started, right? Like you are not this person for forever and always. You started from a different place. So I want to hear a little bit about where you came from and what hooked you into this experience and into astrology.
Yes, I will tell my story quickly if I can. So I actually, did the high school thing, the college thing, and I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up back then, but I knew I was really good at science. So in high school, I was astronomy club president. I went into undergrad as a science major, just kind of following that lead. I loved science. It lit me up. I was just kind of had a natural knack for it. In college, I switched my major to psychology, which I think is interesting now with my new career path. But after school, I ended up in a corporate career, mostly law firms, working in intellectual property, which is patents. Did a little bit of trademarks, but 95% patents. And that career lasted 17 years. So with astrology, historically, I didn't know what it was. I, read my horoscope in the newspaper back in the day. I read my horoscope on the Chinese placemat at the Chinese restaurant, but I didn't know what astrology was until 2012, 2013. I say now that I went through kind of an awakening. It started with me logging into my retirement account at my corporate job, telling myself I was in my early 30s at the time. I was like, I can do this for 30 more years. Like, okay, the money is good. I'm good at this job. I don't love it, but I could do it with, one eye closed and an arm tied behind my back. It just got that kind of repetitive. And I also back then got engaged, and I was with a partner for 7 years. And within 2 months of the engagement, called it off because something felt wrong. I now know that was intuition, which I, work extensively with now. And it didn't make sense. Like I'm a very logical person. I have a Capricorn sun sign, so logic and data and science and all that kind of stuff. But calling off an engagement to a great guy, everybody loved us. Like it didn't make any sense. And I went searching for why I did that. Are you following me so far? So, yeah, I went to different healers and psychics, and I took Reiki classes and Tai Chi and went more kind of the spiritual route. And it was in a Reiki class, which I now call a gateway drug to find your thing, that somebody mentioned astrology. And I'm like, well, what is that? Isn't that just, the newspaper stuff? And they're like, no, it's much more extensive. So as I was taking all these classes, I decided to learn astrology, which I thought I could do in a weekend. I was like, 12 signs, no problem. And then once I started studying astrology, that's a common misconception. It's just the signs. It's not. It is very complex. It is very complicated craft to learn. It is not for everybody to learn. I always say I have every capacity to learn how to change my own oil, but I will pay someone to do that for me. And I found it to be my jam. It just lit me up. I was obsessed from the very first book that I read, and I went all in. I quit all the other classes. I mean, I dabbled here and there in other things, but I found my first teacher on Craigslist, and then I studied under a mentor in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I live for 2 or 3 years. And my mentor has, 50 years experience now. So she was wonderful. And I didn't know what I was doing really, but I felt the whole time like there was a hand behind me, like pushing me on my back. And after 4 years of study, I started an LLC and started my own business. Just thinking I was going to do this as a side gig. I loved it. It was actually very difficult to receive money at first for doing something that I loved, because in the corporate world, it's like, oh, you put your time in and you get your paycheck. That's kind of like what I grew up with too. So that's my story in a nutshell. So I've been doing this professionally since 2017. There was a little bit of overlap with my former career, which I left for good in 2019.
Got it. Wow. Cool. I mean, it's funny, your story and my story sort of parallel in terms of the number of years that we've spent doing the previous career before we found what we were really meant to be doing. And the whole, I'm sure I had a similar experience of logging into my 401k and looking at it and thinking, okay, so how long does it take to get to a place where retirement will be safe? Like that. I remember thinking those same thoughts. So it's amazing that we kind of have similar parallels like that. And I also had a kind of an awakening moment in my own life when I switched over from, my corporate job to what I do now. But I thank you for explaining all of that. You did mention one myth, that it was about just the signs, right? Just about the sun signs. I'm a Capricorn, I'm a Gemini, I'm a, Aquarius, I'm a Cancer, whatever. Can you share a little bit more about what some other myths are or common things that people think astrology is about?
Yeah, I don't get much of those anymore.
Okay.
Things are changing so fast on the planet, but like I thought it was just 12 signs, and I'll get common questions from people like, oh, I'm a Taurus, I shouldn't date a Leo, that kind of thing. I'm like, no, throw that out the window. That's a misconception too, because every person listening to this episode is every sign. You are a mix of every sign of the zodiac. And that is something I didn't know going into this. I thought I was just a Capricorn, right? I'm a Gemini rising. So this is my mask. This is the first sign that people see of me is actually Gemini. And once I get more comfortable, once I get to know people better, then my Capricorn comes out. So just learning that piece, and it's like the intricacies of these signs and how much of each sign do we express, blew my mind. And to this day, I still have a science wired brain. I like things to make sense. And I do believe that astrology is the oldest quote unquote science on this planet. I mean, most, if not every indigenous culture had some kind of relationship to the stars, as above, so below kind of thing. So if you are complaining about that Gemini or that Taurus in your life, now I'm like, ooh, you're rejecting a part of yourself that maybe you don't want to look at.
Wow.
So I don't know if I answered your question. I went on a Gemini tangent there, but just like the sun signs being compatible, just being only your sign. And also astrology for like thinking astrologers are psychic or, pulling from, just intuition, not entirely true.
Yeah.
There is a layer of intuition, I think, in every craft and everything we do in life, but astrology is very science-based. I mean, there's astronomy, there's trigonometry, there's math, but there's also storytelling and mythology and archetypes, more of the psychology of, what we go through on this planet.
Yeah, if anyone who's listening has ever had an astrology reading and that you've seen your chart, you've sent me mine. Every time we've met, you send me mine. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. I can't even begin to pretend that I could understand what that chart means. So it is a deeply complex science. And so I want to talk a little bit about the whole, is it just being psychic and being able to tell the future? Because I have talked about astrology to people, and the way that I look at what you do, Meredith, is that I look at it as another entry point for understanding myself and understanding my life. It is not the thing I don't put all my eggs in the astrology basket when I make choices. Like, I have so many tools and so many sources of information that I've collected over the years for how I choose to be, me being my primary source of information, right? Like my intuition, my truth, all the things I know about myself. But astrology feels like one of those really special and informative tools that can help me understand things. And so when I kind of run out of like the practical answers around things, I turn to things like astrology because there are answers everywhere. But it is not future telling. And so could you just explain a little bit though, like if it's not the future telling, like what is it that you're actually sharing with a client when you are sharing their chart, when you're talking about all of the wealth of their signs, like what is it you're actually sharing with them?
Sure. And I just want to say, I remember in my own learnings looking at a chart and going, no way. How can you ever learn how to read this? It is like learning a new language. So I think I'm first going to explain what an astrology chart is. Your birth chart is actually your horoscope, and that is based on the moment you take your first breath. This is why I hound my clients for the time that they were born. If you were born in the United States in a hospital, the government knows what time you were born. So you can call the county birth records to figure that out. And what that first breath does, hopefully the doctors and nurses in your delivery room wrote it down pretty accurately. It freezes the sky. All right. And I consider that like your map or your blueprint of your true self. Okay. Your birth chart can tell you talents and gifts, maybe that you were born with, that you put on the shelf because your caregivers didn't notice them or didn't encourage them. It can show you if you have a lot of people pleasing tendencies. It can show you where your intuition is very strong. It can show you which career is best suited for you, your passions, desires, and things of that nature. As far as future telling, fortune telling, I do offer forecast sessions. And what those do is take your birth chart, that moment in time when you were born where the sky was frozen, and I look at what the sky today and in the future is going to activate in your birth chart. So I'll use an example, Zovig, because today, when we decided to record this podcast, we both have an activation today.
Okay.
And I looked at this before we started recording, and I started doing some mindfulness practices because I saw what was on both of us. And I want to explain this to you, and I want you to ask me questions if it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
So when you were born, when you took your first breath, the sun was at 7 degrees Gemini specifically. Okay. There's 30 degrees in each sign. When I was born, when I took my first breath, the sign that was rising on the horizon was Gemini at 8 degrees. Okay. So you're 7 degrees. I'm 8 degrees Gemini. Makes sense so far?
Yes.
These are hot spots in both of our birth charts.
Okay.
About an hour ago, the planet Mars was at 7 degrees Gemini. He just moved to 8 degrees Gemini.
Okay.
So I know Mars. He's an action planet. He's red hot, fiery. He can be very angry. He can be very passionate. There's a positive and negative expression of everything that I look at in a birth chart. And I knew I had a very high potential to talk really fast, which I already do naturally. So about an hour before we started recording, I said, okay, stay calm, stay centered, stay focused. You know, I knew that I have Mars on me. So I had to kind of work with the energy, like actually kind of push it back a little bit. And I'm like, I'm going to transmute that into passion to talking to Zovig about my craft.
Okay.
So that's one way, like I used astrology today for this podcast and how I would use it in the future. Kind of like I look at the wins of things in the future versus I don't know what is going to happen. I can't do that. We are human beings. We can't necessarily predict the future with any certainty. I believe now that we can create our best future. And I'll work with my clients to look at which planets, which cosmic ingredients are coming into alignment with their birth chart signatures to create their best future.
Okay. Thank you so much for that explanation. Gemini is your sun sign? Sorry,
It is my rising sign.
Rising sign. Yeah. Okay.
We can talk more about those big three if you'd like.
We might. I'm going to make a note for that because I do think that will dispel the whole I'm a this and only a this, because you are a mix of things. You not only are you have three sort of primary things, but then there's also nodes. And it gets super complicated and extensive, right? Which just tells me that we as people we don't give ourselves enough credit for how layered and how complex and how multidimensional we are. We are not only one way, but sometimes we like to get attached to these. Well, I'm totally a Capricorn. Like I'm totally pragmatic and practical. I'm all about the work and doing high quality work, and I'm all about doing a job and all of that. And I always think when people say things like that, it's like, really, that's not all you are. There's so much more there. So I love that. I want you to explain the big three. So let's put a pin in that. But just for a moment, I would love to hear what kinds of things people come to you for. Like, why are they
Sure.
talking to you?
I mean, each session that I do with individuals is unique. I ask my clients, what do you want to know? And most of my birth chart or soul path sessions are honestly like peeling back programming. Most of us were raised to be a certain way, encouraged to fit in boxes that maybe we don't fit in. I mean, in hindsight now, I never fit in the corporate box or the 40-hour work week. And if you question those things, you get a lot of criticism or resistance. And when I started studying my own chart, I was like, I knew I was like this. I knew this about myself, but I talked myself out of being this way because it wasn't approved or the people in my life didn't like that part of me.
Yeah.
So I really work with people to peel back the programming or the onion layers to find their true, authentic, unique self. Okay. I do work with the idea that we are spiritual beings having a temporary physical human experience. So I work with symbols in the chart, kind of telling a story. What did you in this life want to experience, accomplish? Like, what are your goals? What are your hidden talents? So many people are talented and gifted and don't think that they are.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite things is just seeing people get goosebumps, their eyes light up and say things, how did you know this about me? I knew this when I was 5, but I let it get swept away in the mix of, fitting in, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That experience of being affirmed for knowing for who you are, I still enjoy that. I mean, I've had several readings with you, and anytime that happens, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And I just kind of feel like reaffirmed in who I am. Yeah, that is right. That is me, because we can get disconnected from who we are. And it usually starts pretty early on in our lives because we are told, that's not going to work. People won't like that. You won't fit in. You'll be ostracized. And sometimes it comes from a loving place of wanting to keep us safe, right? I know for me growing up, a lot of that sort of, don't do that, don't talk too much. That was just like, stay out of trouble. Like, I don't want you, as your parent, I don't want you to get in trouble. But that kind of stuff has long-term effects. And then we put ourselves in these boxes. We get put in a box. And then when we take over our own lives, when we become adults, we keep ourselves in those boxes because it feels familiar and right and appropriate and safe and all the things. And then, at some point, hopefully there's some kind of, I had some jarring moments that were kind of pushing me to look at, is this the box I want to be in? And do I even want to be in a box at all? And everybody has those moments for different reasons in different ways. But the experience of understanding that there's more to us and more that we're capable of doing, and those hidden talents, that's why I coach, Meredith, because, I have a different form of helping people understand. And you said, peel back the programming. I love that phrase, peel back. I'm stealing that, full disclosure. I will be saying that. Peel back the programming. I come at this from a coaching perspective, but being able to help people see that they have the authority over themselves to peel that back and get curious about it and kind of question it is beautiful. And you do it through what I think is a really fun medium. Like, it's really interesting to hear about the different signs and how they're constructed and the planets that are attached and how complex it can get. It's tremendous. Have you ever had clients who sort of, and this is just my morbid curiosity, but like, you're working with them and then you give them some information and then suddenly it kind of freaks them out and maybe they might reject it, or they don't want to understand it or want to hear it. Has that ever happened in any conversations?
Quite often.
Yeah.
And it's happened when I've been on the receiving end as well. There's, an instant resistance or pushback. Myself and even clients have trouble receiving, whether that's a compliment or information. And if you, like I did in my corporate world, I just rationalize so hard, so hard that it became real. And that was like, I was happy, that kind of thing. So that program can put up a fight, kind of like, I say, Agent Smith from the Matrix kind of thing, that resistance. And I always tell my clients, I try to don't take anything and everything out of my mouth as truth for you. Please run it through your own intuitive filter to make sure it makes sense for you. I'm doing my absolute best to interpret your chart for you because I know it's so difficult, but I don't want to be the be all end all, like say something and you believe it's true, because so many of us did this as children. Someone told us we had big ears or we weren't good enough in some way. And I always try and put a positive light on my sessions. I always work with a positive expression of each planet, each sign. But yeah, it's a wild ride and every client is different. And I'm a Gemini rising, so I can adapt. I can be mutable. I can be what they need in the moment and land on my feet in every session. So I've had pushback. I've had, religious programming more at the beginning of when I open my doors, kind of like asking questions. Is this bad? Is this the devil's work? Those kinds of things. I think I've seen a lot. But yeah, I'll get some resistance. And a lot of the time they come back months or years later and say, I didn't like when you said this. And I actually like that feedback. I didn't like when you said that. I got very angry when you said that, but I integrated it and sat with it and noticed that I needed to hear it.
Yeah. Okay, I want to jump back in time for a moment. I do want you to talk about sort of the big three as you referred to them, the sun sign, the rising sign, and the moon sign, I'm assuming is what you're talking about. Is that accurate? Yeah.
Correct.
So could you share a little bit about those so people understand the start to see the dimension of what astrology means?
Sure. This is where I recommend everybody start, whether you actually want to study astrology or get to know your own chart. I promise if you learn the big three about yourself and the people that you love, the people in your life, it will change your perspective on a lot of things. So most people, I would say, know their sun sign. Would you agree? Do you know anyone that doesn't know their sun sign?
Once in a while, I will.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been probably years that I would ask that question and someone would go, "Oh, I'm not sure. I think I'm a," and then I will ask them when their birthday is and I'm like, "Oh, you're a this." So like I will fill in the blank, but not often. Most people, it's pretty household common knowledge.
Okay, good. Good to hear. And if you're born between like the 19th and 22nd of any month, you might be a cusper. So you might want to check on an astrology app or with an astrologer what actually your sun sign is. So let me just briefly go over the big three and describe the symbolism. The sun sign, the sun changes once a month. We have 12 signs, is symbolic of your conscious identity. I consider it more like the ego construct of the zodiac. We need an ego to be here. It's our life force itself. Your sun sign wants to shine. All right. You shine doing your sun sign stuff. So Zovig, you are a Gemini, a sign of communication, a coach, podcast host, slam dunk for you. Okay.
All right. We finally made it. We made it. We clicked into place.
Yeah. And that's why you say, I am a Capricorn. Zovig, you say, I am a Gemini. It's that sense of I. Okay. Very conscious identity. The moon sign is the second of the big three. Where was the moon where you were born? This is just as important as the sun. And if you're looking, yours is Pisces.
It's Pisces, yes.
Yeah. But Zovig, this is interesting because you are actually a cusper with your moon sign. So a few hours, I can look this up if we need to in the future, before you were born, the moon was actually in Aquarius the day you were born and moved into Pisces right around the time you were born. So you can be a cusper with the moon sign too, but you are officially a Pisces moon. Okay. The moon in the sky is reflected light, doesn't have her own light source. So in astrology, very simply, the moon is our unconscious identity or our subconscious. It's linked to our intuition, our higher self. Sometimes I refer to the moon as the backseat driver in our chart. I described when I opened my doors, I had this like hand, kind of felt like it was pushing on my back. And that was more of my moon sign leading the way and my ego was on the shelf. It made no sense for me to open a business. Okay. The moon in astrology is also symbolic of mother. So it can be fertility, your mother and mother's line, and also how we learn and process emotions. So the moon symbolism is very deep, but I'd encourage everyone, if you don't know your moon sign, download an app on your phone, just pull it up, enter your birth information, and find out what is the backseat driving your chart. It could be the same as your sun sign, only if you were born on a new moon. Otherwise, it's very likely your moon sign is different than your sun sign. The moon changes signs every 2.5 days.
So I want to share with you one thing about my moon sign. You and I had a reading, I don't know, year and a half ago, something like that. And you said you reminded me that my moon sign was Pisces and that Pisces is a water sign. And by the way, all of these signs have elements attached to them, which is a whole other layer of this. But you told me that that Pisces is the most intuitive sign on the chart. And something changed for me when you said that, Meredith. Something changed for me because connecting with my intuition has been it's been like a touch and go experience for me, not trusting it. And I know we all kind of can have our sort of questioning our own intuition. And is this right? Or is it my bias? Am I trying to make it right, et cetera? And ever since that day, when you said that to me, something shifted for me in terms of how I listen to my own intuition. And things have felt different in my life. I have spent little to no time questioning my intuition. I move a little bit faster. My choices have been more resolute, right? There's just a listening that I have had because you affirmed something. You didn't tell me who I am. You just affirmed something. Then I get to do what I want with it, right? Like you said, like you're giving me information and I get to decide what to do with it. It affirmed something for me. And it really shifted particularly how I make choices for myself in my business, how I work in sessions with clients, in moments where I'm group training and something is happening in the room and I trust my intuition and I go into it. And I've had really incredible results from doing that because I simply heard you say that's the most intuitive sign on the chart. And I thought, let me play with that. That's really cool. I felt very proud about that, even though I had nothing to do with it. And so, or maybe I did.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it shifted for me.
Your Gemini ego would have fought you.
My Gemini ego has been in years of therapy, Meredith. My Gemini ego has got put in its place so many times in my 20s and 30s that like it was ready to be like, yeah, okay, let's see what's up, Pisces.
Oh, because, your conscious identity, Gemini really loves facts and information and spreadsheets and data. And that mental world is Gemini's, place. But Pisces, your moon sign, feel things in your body too. How does your body respond when you say, I'm going to go through door A versus door B? Just sit with that. And is my body kicking on something? And your sun and moon are actually in a little bit of a stressful aspect in the birth chart. So you might have felt in your life that you had an angel devil on your shoulder. I'm thinking this versus feeling this. And as a Gemini, as the twins, that adds an extra layer of that kind of like back and forth. Yeah. But that is beautiful to hear. I'm so glad that information helped you. And you've learned and leaned into trusting that intuition, which is pretty strong with that Pisces moon.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So we did the sun, we did the moon. Yeah. Talk to me about the rising.
The rising sign. This is, again, why I need your birth time. It sets the whole chart in motion. If you do read horoscopes in the newspaper, if they still have those, actually read your rising sign. The horoscope writers write based on the rising sign. So this is the sign that was rising on the horizon the moment you took your first breath. And this changes every hour or two. Okay. Sun sign once a month changes. Moon sign 2.5 days. The rising sign every hour or two. This is symbolic of the energy you're pumping out of your energy field when you first meet people, or you can consider it the mask that we put on when we go to the grocery store, the airport, a party where we don't really know that many people. So, my mask is Gemini. I am a Gemini rising. I'm very Gemini-like when I'm on podcasts and at parties. I just like bounce around. And then my Capricorn will come out later once I get a little bit more comfortable. So I don't know, Zovig, I always ask my clients this, and maybe I asked you in the past, do you have any feedback or comments from partners, coworkers, friends, what they thought about you when they first met you versus when they got to know you better? Because when they first met you, they should be describing your rising sign.
Okay, so my rising sign is Leo. Mm-hmm. And so I have had, I'm digging into the dating archives from way back in the day, but I think I can come out as the Gemini really, really hard and fast and furious. At least that's what I've been told. I don't know. I don't really know anything about the Leo, so I'm not sure, but I know that I become more introverted as I get to know somebody.
Okay, I can explain that too. So I'm actually going to share, which I've never shared with you. I remember my first impression of you. Mm-hmm. I was intimidated by you. I
That I
thought you
get a
gave up
lot.
this air of confidence, Leo the lion, like I got this. I mean, your business name is Bold, which isn't it bold or is
It's
it
boldness,
some
boldness ablaze.
bold? Yeah.
Yeah.
That is such a Leo keyword, right? So and I'm learning Leo in my birth chart. So that's like a foreign sign to me. So you did pump out this air of confidence, and that can be intimidating to certain people. So I was going to guess that you've received that feedback
Oh, all the
maybe
time.
at first.
All the
And then
time.
they're like, oh, you're a goofy Gemini. Oh,
Okay.
like that's not intimidating. And then the very last sign you show people is the moon sign. You have to feel safe with people, your most sensitive unconscious identity, to show your moon sign. And that Pisces will pull you into the more introverted realm.
Yeah.
Okay.
That explains a lot. So thank you for explaining the Leo, because I really haven't looked too much into it. But yeah, you're intimidating, especially when I was dating. I got a lot of the you're intimidating kind of thing. And I get it. Right. I understand it. And there's part of me that's like, no, but if you just wait a little while,
When the mask comes off,
right?
when the mask comes
Yeah.
off.
Just give me a minute and then you'll get to see what's underneath. Because what's underneath, I think, is way cooler. And I think it's like that for everybody, anyone that I've taken the time in my life to get to know and spend lots of time with, which is why I like to coach people for long periods of time, because after 6 months, then the real stuff starts to come out. Right. And the real stuff is where the gold is. Like that's where the gold flies. So thank you for explaining that. That's really cool.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to say, using your chart as an example, is Leo is a fire sign, but you have an air sun and a water moon. So if you are in your mask too much, that's burnout for you. That is like frying your circuitry. That is frying your systems. And there is a planet that rules every sign of the zodiac, or think of it like every sign has a planet that's a best friend. And the sun rules Leo, your rising sign. And I would look to your sun sign, which is Gemini, for more flavor to your rising sign. Okay. So you said my Gemini does come out. It is bleeding through to your rising sign. And that's not true for everybody. Their sun sign might not be linked to their rising sign. And that can explain why people, very comfortable off camera. And then the camera comes on and their mask clicks into place and they seem like a completely different personality. Yeah. Like they're just boom, gone. So yeah, just really want to emphasize, like, learn those big three. Your partners, your kids, your friends, you'll be like, that's why they do that, or that's why they behave like that at a party or get nervous in public, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Okay. So tell me a little bit about how you see people integrating the information from readings with you into their lives. It's really fun to hear. Like, fun is one of my core values. And I always have a lot of fun when we talk, but also there's real juicy, meaty information that I get to take and interpret and integrate, and then pick and choose how and when and if I want to sort of activate on it. So tell me how you see people, or how you think we should be using the information that comes from astrology.
Sure. The example that is popping into my head is, first, I like to give people permission to be themselves, because maybe we didn't get that permission as children or teenagers, that kind of thing. And I think I'm going to use Libra as my example. Libra is kind of the most famous people pleaser of the zodiac. I asked my Libras, how hard is it for you to say the word no? I actually think there's a book titled How to Say No. I haven't read it, but maybe if you're a Libra, you want to pick that up. And maybe this is kind of coaching on my end. I would encourage them, like, it's okay to say no. You don't have to do everything for everyone. It's not your responsibility to keep everyone in the room happy. That is exhausting. And when I see people, their faces register that they are a people pleaser, and bringing conscious awareness to it, it changes the game. So that's what I like to do with clients, is like shift their conscious awareness, more self-awareness, to things that they're just kind of doing and going through the motions, and give them permission to either stop doing it if it's not serving them, or if they're getting burnt out, or if they just like are stagnant, they're stuck. Usually if you're stuck, you're, not performing to the best of your life force, your motivations, that kind of thing. So I love just the conscious awareness, the self-awareness, take a little notch up, and then they start to practice. For a Libra, saying no. That's not going to come overnight typically. It's like practicing an instrument or working a muscle. Things take time to change. I use the word neuroplasticity a lot, changing the wiring in your brain. This is a science word maybe you're familiar with. To start to practice rewiring yourself back to your true nature, which got lost in the mix in your life somehow. Does that answer your question about kind of how to integrate information and work with it?
Yeah. Yeah. And on an everyday, like, so what I heard you say is, and using the example of the Libra, you acknowledge this sort of people pleasing tendency that can be pretty strong in those, in Libras. And you have said it out loud. So you kind of surfaced it, right? And then they acknowledge it and they say, yes, that's accurate. And then you can't unsee it. That's what I was
like
hearing.
That.
It's like once you see that or hear that, you can't unsee or unhear it. So, and I just said this to a client the other day. And now every time, I think, if you're interested, right, you have to be interested to do this. You can't just, it doesn't happen by magic. Like self-awareness, we have to have an interest in it. But let's say you are interested and then you go and you're in a meeting or, you know, and with your boss and he or she says something like that you would normally just automatically say yes to. You now hear the people pleasing piece that is typical. Not, oh, and by the way, this is not like blanket. Everything is not exact for everybody, but that is typical. That is a tendency. And then you get to, in that moment, make a conscious choice about whether or not you want to be that way or do something else because you can't unsee it.
That might be very scary though.
Yes.
Right?
Of course.
Like to integrate some of this stuff, it's sometimes requires pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. As we talked about the corporate world, we got like comfortable there, but like also uncomfortable. So yeah, it can be scary, but the more you practice anything, the better you get at it. And your story about integrating your Pisces moon information, that was another great example of just like how I can't unhear that I'm intuitive. Cannot unhear it. I'm gonna play with this. I'm gonna work with it.
Right. Yeah. And once I love the self-awareness and the conscious awareness piece of what you do, because that's all I care about, right? That's what this podcast is for. That's all of my work. It's like, all I care about is that we're raising our awareness of ourselves so we can make conscious choices that serve us. And that we're just aware of our choices and we're not going on old programming. We're not going on old habitual things that are just sort of running in the background that have been fine. Right. Or maybe not so fine. But a lot of our stuff the programming produces fine results. No one's going to complain about them. You know, your job was fine. You said I could do this and you'd have a lovely retirement. I could have kept going in media and marketing and it would have been fine. Right.
We are so similar. That's exactly what I said about my old job and my old relationship. It would have been fine.
It would have been fine. Nothing terrible. Right. But fine's not enough. Like, let's be honest. Let's call it fine is fine. And for me in my life and anybody I come into contact with, I have a pretty strong stance that fine is not okay. And it doesn't mean we have to be out there doing all the things and breaking barriers. It's like, no, to me, not being just fine is me feeling content within myself, me feeling excited and joy in the things that I choose to engage with and the people I choose to spend my time with. That's not extraordinary or big world stage type stuff, but it's not fine. It's actually excellent.
There you go. There's your Leo speaking.
Is that what it is?
I think so. Yeah. Go big or go home in this life. Yeah. Go big or go home.
And your go big and go home might look totally different from mine. It might be more subdued and more nuanced and more, you know, on a sort of smaller, more introverted scale. And that's great too. But let's just check our fine. And astrology gives me a way to check my fine.
I like that. Yeah. And to each their own. Fine is fine for some people. Some people don't want to push themselves out their comfort zone. Like you don't need to. There is, you know, I think of like nothing you absolutely need to do besides find your own joy, find your own peace. And that is a different flavor for every human being on this planet. And that's what astrology can help with too. You aren't the same as your spouse. You aren't the same as your friends, your coworkers. You each have a unique signature. And what brings you joy and peace might not bring another person joy and peace. And astrology can help with that as well.
Yeah. Now, I just want to hone in on the awareness piece of this. And I called it sort of once you hear or see it, you can't unhear or unsee it. And you did say that sometimes it can be scary for people to activate on the new information that they have? Like just again, with the Libra example, it might be scary for them, really uncomfortable for them to say no, even though they know, oh, I'm people pleasing. I'm doing it right now, and I've had those moments where I look at myself and go, I'm doing it right now. I'm doing the thing I don't want to do anymore right now. I can feel it. It feels wrong. And, and I want you to talk a little bit about how you've seen people sort of face some of those. We could just call them fears or hesitations or, worries or concerns, but I'm going to call it fear. How you've seen people use what you share with them to sort of face their fears. Like what kinds of changes have you seen in the people you work with?
So many changes. I mean, when I work with repeat clients, just the year or two I hadn't seen them, the evolution I've seen in front of my face, I just want to put it on all the screens in the world. I have a front row seat to a lot of magic, and maybe you feel the same way. And I just want to shout it from the mountaintop. So I'll do my best to tell a few kind of generic stories of what I've seen and how I've seen people evolve. Maybe I'll use another sign as an example, which is Taurus. So Taurus is a sign that can cling to safety and security and comfort. Taurus prefers to be heaven on earth. I got my money, I got my nice things, and it's most famously that stubborn bull, the most stuck sign, because they can cling to safety. And what safety means for each Taurus might be different. But Tauruses tend to stay in a job past the expiration date of that job because they have a nice, comfy corporate paycheck or whatever that looks like. They can maybe stay in a romantic relationship too long because it's safe, but they're not growing, they're not evolving, they're not getting much from the relationship besides that safety. So there's been a planet traveling through Taurus the last couple of years that's been kind of activating Tauruses, saying, is it time to jump off the diving board? Is it time to take a risk? Is it time to leave your safety zone? And what I can say from my experience, maybe your experience as well, you can speak to this, pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, taking that risk, taking that leap, massive leaps and bounds in confidence and trust and faith and your own abilities and what you can go through. So when I see people register that they are even clinging to safety or security and then taking that leap and doing the scary thing, they find out it wasn't actually that scary. It was just my thoughts about it, my fears, my phobias. And once I kind of did it, the thoughts calmed down. Like the universe kind of just opened up for me. I found out what I was made out of, what I can do, what I can accomplish. And I didn't know that when I was stuck in my safety world or my safe world where everything maybe was fine, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I can't add anything to that, Meredith. That's a great place for us. I mean, I could literally talk about this stuff with you forever and a day. And I look forward to when you and I work together, which will be very soon because you've got me very excited about this. But I just want to say, that what you do and the format and the form that you do it in is really special. And it provides people, you use the word magic, it provides people with a little bit of magic. It can give, I always feel a little sprinkle of pixie dust after we talk because like I said at the beginning, you're coming at them and their life and giving them information that they can apply and use and discover through a different place, through an unexpected and surprising place, through a format that not a lot of people maybe more now. I think it's becoming a little more common to think about and talk about astrology, but that isn't necessarily the first place we might go to get our answers. It's a really unique and special place that has a lot of complexity and a lot of interesting qualities. And it can be a lot of fun to talk about the different signs and how they relate and having those moments of going, oh, that's why. And
Yeah.
the oh, that's why moments are so fun because it just opens up so much understanding to things that we see and we don't quite get, but we see it over and over again, and we see it in ourselves or we see it in our relationships. And then when we get that there's a real reason behind it, it's just, there's like relief and sort of freedom in those moments. Like, oh, that's why. When you said the Leo thing, now I have a little information on Leo, but oh, that's why I get on my little soapbox and give a TED talk about how fine is not fine. Interesting. Okay. Right. So I just want to encourage people, and Meredith, I'm going to have your information in the show notes so people can get a hold of you, because I would love people to come in droves to speak to you. But I love that you shared the practicality of what this, this practice, is it a practice? Is it a discipline? How would you?
I say practice. I mean, I practice astrology every day. It's like a craft that I feel like can never be mastered because there's so much more depth. There's so much to learn. I am obsessed. It's my jam, and I love it. I could talk to 5 a.m. about astrology. It just happened to fit me, but that's okay if it's not for everyone. Maybe it's like the Myers-Briggs psychology or the Enneagram, whatever you gravitate towards. When I first learned astrology, I was like, everyone must know this. Like, we must teach it in schools. And I'm like, okay, hold on, back off. It's not for everybody, but it is for a lot of people, and it can explain so much, even with romance. I was a goody two shoes Capricorn, and I was always attracted to the bad boys. And I was like, oh, my chart kind of explained that. I was like, that's why. Oh, there it is. There is my love signature in the birth chart. And that's why I was always attracted to men that were very, very different than me. So much you can do with it on a business side, romantic partnership, friendships, even with your children, getting to know their inner world, I think can help unlock their magic and yours as well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Meredith, thank you so much. Thank you so much for making this accessible, explaining in a way that I think everybody can understand, and creating a little bit of curiosity and pixie dust just in this episode. Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Take good care of yourself. Lots of love. Big energy.